The moment the glass door slid open at Dubai International Airport, everything changed, and this time there was no red carpet, no royal protocol, no carefully staged entrance. There was only a passport, a scanner, and a decision that had already been made. Early 16th February 2026, Terminal 3. According to documented accounts, Meghan Markle arrived in Dubai expecting discretion, insulation, perhaps even reinvention. Dubai, after all, is a city that understands power, image, and silence. It is not chaotic, it is calculated. It does not perform drama, it eliminates it. At approximately 9:40 am local time, her passport was scanned at immigration, which should have taken seconds reportedly stretched longer. The system screen flickered. Officers exchanged a glance. No raised voices. No public confrontation. Just a subtle gesture directing her away from the public queue and into a private processing area reserved for administrative review. There were no phones allowed. No explanation offered. No visible confusion. Those present later described the atmosphere as clinical, procedural, the kind of silence that signals a decision made long before wheels touched the runway. By 10:15 am, the determination was reportedly final. Entry was not postponed, not conditionally deferred, it was declined outright. No press statement followed, no spokesperson appeared, no dramatic standoff for cameras. Within hours, Meghan Markle was no longer in Dubai. Witnesses described her demeanor as controlled yet visibly tense, not shocked, not confused, but angry. And that silence, that was the message. Dubai's governance model is not impulsive. It is built on risk assessment, stability, and reputational containment. Immigration decisions at that level are rarely personal. They are systemic. The question is not morality, it is volatility. Does this individual introduce unpredictability, media disruption, diplomatic discomfort? According to analysts familiar with regional norms, visibility is not leverage in Dubai. Apologies are not currency. Predictability is everything. Sources suggest the assessment was not triggered by a single headline, but by accumulation. Months of global media turbulence, conflicting public narratives, legal noise, staff disputes, financial uncertainty, reputational friction across multiple jurisdictions. Dubai did not need proof beyond reasonable doubt. It needed only to decide whether granting access created downstream risk, and in that calculation, the door was closed. But that airport moment was only the surface crack. The real tremor was already building elsewhere, in Canada. For years, Meghan Markle's 2012-2015 Toronto chapter had been framed as a professional ascent. She was filming Suits, building her brand, living independently, a clean prelude to meeting Prince Harry in 2016. But in early February 2026, that narrative began to fracture. Royal monitoring teams reportedly flagged inconsistencies between previously published biographies and resurfaced claims regarding her personal life during her Canadian residency. These discrepancies did not come from a single source. They emerged from convergence, an off-camera audio leak, social media posts, and re-emerging individuals connected to her pre-royal past. At the center of renewed attention stood Chef Corey Vitiello. Corey Vitiello was publicly known as Meghan Markle's partner during much of her Toronto stay. Their relationship had never been denied, but its duration, depth, and ending are now being re-examined in light of newer allegations. Reports described shared residency, intertwined professional networks, and a sudden separation in mid-2015, details that appear to contrast with earlier public timelines suggesting a longer period of independence before she met Prince Harry in 2016. Then came the podcast. A Toronto-based investigative podcast released an episode featuring anonymized testimony attributed to a former long-term partner. The speaker was not formally identified, but listeners quickly linked the account to Corey Vitiello based on specific references to locations, dates, and private conversations already present in public records. The podcast stopped short of alleging illegal activity, but it raised uncomfortable questions. Were aspects of Meghan Markle's personal history selectively presented during royal vetting processes? And then another rumor resurfaced, a sealed U.S. marriage record allegedly dating back to 2011. No court publicly confirmed such a document. Meghan's representatives described the claims as speculative and defamatory, but persistence matters in the digital age. When allegations echo across platforms, pressure builds not because of proof, but because of repetition. Legal experts interviewed by British and Canadian outlets emphasized a crucial distinction. If any prior legal marriage had existed and was knowingly knowingly undisclosed during royal entry procedures, it could constitute a procedural breach, regardless of intent, not moral judgment. Administrative compliance. Inside Buckingham Palace, officials neither confirmed nor denied specific allegations. Instead, they framed their response as due diligence. Internal reviews reportedly focused on documentation, disclosure standards, and whether any material omissions occurred during background checks prior to the 2018 wedding. Public reactions split sharply. Supporters argued the scrutiny reflected disproportionate fixation on a woman's past relationships. Critics countered that transparency is essential when personal history intersects with constitutional institutions. Meghan Markle herself remained largely silent beyond legal statements rejecting the allegations. Silence can be strategic, or it can be interpreted as evasion. As February progressed, what looked like a contained flare-up evolved into something bigger, a reckoning over narrative control, historical accuracy, and institutional accountability. And then the counteroffensive began. By early February 2026, her legal team reportedly issued pre-litigation notices to several media outlets, podcasts, and digital platforms. These communications emphasized potential liability arising from unauthorized insinuation, voice attribution without consent, and speculative linkage to private records. Takedown requests were filed across social platforms targeting posts connecting her name to alleged sealed records or misrepresentation during royal vetting. Many were denied under public interest exemptions, but the volume alone signaled intent. Slow the virality, fragment the conversation. Opinion pieces appeared within a 48-hour window across U.S. and Canadian gossip columns, advancing similar themes: disgruntled ex-partners, opportunistic storytelling, unreliable memory filtered through resentment. Discredit the messenger to weaken the message. Meanwhile, her team reportedly encouraged a career-only narrative of the Canadian years, minimizing personal associations, emphasizing professional discipline. Former colleagues were approached for supportive quotes highlighting focus, ambition, independence. At the same time, trademark filings for a new lifestyle platform were expedited, signaling potential rebranding, distancing from identities entangled with royal affiliation. But crisis timing is brutal. As legal maneuvers unfolded, new voices entered the conversation: former partners, past associates, commentators familiar with royal procedures. Momentum favors those introducing information, not those reacting. By mid-February, the counteroffensive had fragmented the narrative, but it had not restored control. And beyond headlines, something quieter began shifting: commercial confidence. Deals did not collapse publicly. They stalled. Agencies pushed exploratory talks to Q2 pending reassessment. Revenue share models shifted toward fixed, performance contingent structures. Memoranda expired without renewal. Not punishment, protection. Branding consultants put it bluntly: it's not about controversy, it's about predictability. When every activation risks becoming a headline unrelated to the product, roar changes. Streaming projects entered prolonged development holds. Due diligence expanded beyond finances into historical affiliations and prior contractual disputes. The market was not accusing, it was recalculating. And while one side fought in headlines, the palace chose something far more devastating: restraint. No emergency press conferences. No emotional rebuttals. Titles were not publicly stripped, but usage guidelines were reinterpreted. Invitations did not vanish overnight, they simply never arrived. Access was not revoked in a headline, it eroded through protocol. Behind the scenes, a comprehensive review examined every commercial contract and third-party agreement associated with the Sussex brand since their departure. Not punishment, separation. And as the turbulence settled, a deeper question emerged: what happens when modern celebrity logic collides with an institution designed to operate on centuries, not cycles? The answer increasingly appeared to favor time. By early spring 2026, the noise had not disappeared, it had matured. The headlines were no longer explosive, they were analytical. The frenzy had shifted into assessment, and that shift was far more dangerous. Because when outrage fades, evaluation begins. Inside commercial circles, the so-called confidence pause deepened. According to industry insiders, no major contracts were dramatically terminated. There were no fiery announcements, no public breakups between brand and personality. Instead, negotiations stretched, email responses slowed, clauses multiplied. Exploratory talks that had once moved quickly were quietly pushed to Q2 for internal reassessment. Revenue share structures were reconsidered in favor of fixed performance contingent models. Memoranda of understanding simply expired without renewal. This is how confidence erodes in corporate ecosystems, not not with explosions, with hesitation. Financial analysts were clear. It was not about legal guilt. It was about volatility exposure. When a public figure's name requires contextual disclaimers, reputational footnotes, and legal risk clauses, the cost of association rises, not morally, operationally. Streaming platforms reportedly placed certain development concepts on prolonged holds. Due diligence expanded beyond financial review into historical affiliations and prior contractual disputes. Greenlight committees began weighing narrative stability alongside creative potential. That word again, stability. Merchandising and lifestyle ventures reacted differently. Rather than halt discussions outright, some partners proposed structural separation, minimizing personal attribution or introducing third-party ambassadors. Preserve the product. Reduce the name. But when a name becomes optional rather than central, leverage shifts. The inversion was stark. Between 2021 and 2023, association carried aspirational value. By 2026, association required justification, and justification is friction. As major partners slowed, smaller collaborators followed. Momentum, that intangible yet critical asset, began to thin. Projects reliant on sequential commitments stalled when early adopters hesitated. No coordination was required. Markets are decentralized. When independent actors reach similar conclusions, outcomes appear synchronized. The landscape had not collapsed, but it had tightened. And then the palace moved, not loudly, not dramatically, but structurally. Rather than engage publicly with allegations, Buckingham Palace initiated a comprehensive internal review. The scope was precise. Every commercial contract, public appearance, and third-party agreement associated with the Sussex brand since their departure from royal duties. The central question: had any activity crossed the boundary between private enterprise and implied royal endorsement? Titles were not stripped in headlines. Instead, usage guidelines were reinterpreted. Invitations did not vanish, they ceased to arrive. Access was not revoked, it eroded through protocol. This was containment through credibility. One constitutional lawyer reportedly described it bluntly: this was not about punishment, it was about separation. The most sensitive dimension of that review involved the children, Archie and Lilibet. Palace sources stressed they were not under scrutiny as individuals, but as symbols. Their names and implied status had become central to media strategies and commercial narratives far beyond the United Kingdom. New internal directives reportedly emerged. Any commercial use of royal titles, line of succession references, or symbolic imagery connected to minors would be challenged legally, quietly, methodically. The effect rippled immediately. Streaming platforms grew cautious. Publishing houses requested revisions. Legal teams inserted clauses where none had existed before. Monetization did not halt because of scandal. It slowed because of uncertainty. And uncertainty in commercial storytelling is poison. Inside the royal family, recalibration continued. Public appearances emphasized continuity. Speeches focused on duty. Symbolic gestures reinforced the monarchy's role as enduring institution rather than personality-driven enterprise. Certain names did not disappear, but they were deprioritized, not erased, reallocated. The louder external narratives became, the quieter the institution responded. And in that contrast, credibility subtly shifted, because silence backed by structure carries authority. As the turbulence settled into assessment, a larger philosophical clash surfaced. What happens when modern celebrity logic collides with an institution built to operate on centuries rather than cycles? For personal brands, momentum is oxygen. Engagement must be constant. Narratives must renew themselves. Silence invites reinterpretation. For institutions like the British monarchy, endurance is oxygen. Controversy is absorbed, contextualized, and eventually neutralized by continuity. This asymmetry proved decisive. By early spring, analysts observed divergence. Monarchical approval metrics stabilized. Public sentiment surrounding associated commercial figures became increasingly polarized. Support remained within dedicated audiences, but neutrality, essential for mass market success, softened. The children's future role remained undefined. Royal, private, hybrid? In that ambiguity lay risk, not of scandal, but of prolonged limbo. Legal experts emphasized that the institution's forward priority was insulation. Shielding future generations from reputational volatility has become a priority across European monarchies. The Sussex episode was increasingly studied not merely as family tension, but as case study in boundary failure. There are lessons embedded in this recalibration. Transparency is powerful, but it is not neutral. It reshapes incentives. It rewards immediacy over patience, emotion over structure. Institutions that adapt too quickly risk dissolving authority. Those that adapt too slowly risk irrelevance. dominance. The crown appears to believe it has found a narrow path between the two. Whether history agrees remains to be seen. What is undeniable is that the center of gravity shifted. The monarchy reasserted itself not through dominance, but detachment. It drew lines not with force, but with time. Time does not argue. It accumulates. Years from now, this period may not be remembered for a single allegation, podcast episode, immigration decision, or commercial stall. It may be remembered for the recalibration it forced between legacy and visibility, between institution and individual, between silence and spectacle. Because in conflicts between narrative and endurance, narrative must constantly prove itself. Endurance simply waits. And as February 2026 recedes into record rather than headline, the message remains unmistakable. In the contest between momentum and memory, memory does not need to win the moment. It only needs to remain standing after it passes. Standing after it passes. Standing after it passes. Standing after it passes.